All the waiters ran from the arrogant millionaire, until the new girl stood up to him. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. All the waiters ran from the arrogant millionaire, until the new girl stood up to him. It was the kind of evening that felt like any other at the high-end restaurant. But Emma couldn't have been more nervous. She had only just started working there, and everything about the upscale atmosphere was intimidating to her. The soft hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware filled the air as Emma nervously adjusted her apron. The polished tables gleamed under the warm lighting, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive food and fine wine. She felt out of place in her second-hand dress and scuffed shoes. As she walked through the restaurant, she kept her head low, trying not to draw attention. Then, she saw him. At the far end of the dining room, sitting alone at a table for one, was a man who seemed to tower over the rest of the patrons. His sharp suit, perfectly groomed hair, and the way he looked down at the menu as if he owned the place immediately told Emma that he wasn't just any customer. He was the type who would never notice someone like her. As she approached his table, she hesitated for a moment, her heart racing. This was her first real job in a place like this, and she was already terrified of making a mistake. But she had to get through the night. She forced a smile and leaned over slightly. "Excuse me, sir. Can I take your order?" He looked up from his menu, his cold, calculating gaze meeting hers for a split second. Without a word, he handed her the menu with a sharp nod. Emma took it from his hand and retreated quickly, feeling the weight of his gaze burning into the back of her neck. As the night went on, Emma noticed that none of the other waiters dared to approach him. They seemed to give him wide berth, avoiding eye contact and quickly scurrying away whenever he waved them over. There was something about him that made everyone uneasy, an arrogance that couldn't be ignored. Emma, on the other hand, had always been taught to give everyone a chance, no matter how intimidating they seemed. When it was time for her to deliver his order, she walked over with the same smile, though this time it felt forced. The polished tables gleamed under the warm lighting, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive food and fine wine. She felt out of place in her second-hand dress and scuffed shoes. As she walked through the restaurant, she kept her head low, trying not to draw attention. Then, she saw him. At the far end of the dining room, sitting alone at a table for one, was a man who seemed to tower over the rest of the patrons. He simply stared at the wine stain for a moment, then glanced up at her with a cold, dismissive expression. "You should be more careful," he said flatly, his tone oozing disdain. Emma stood there for a second, stunned. But then, something inside her snapped. She couldn't let this man walk all over her like he did with everyone else in the restaurant. Without thinking, she straightened up and looked him directly in the eye. "You know, it's not always easy being the one everyone runs away from. But maybe if you didn't treat people like they're beneath you, you'd get better service," she said, her voice firm but not disrespectful. His expression changed immediately. For a moment, he just stared at her, clearly taken aback. Emma waited, her heart pounding, unsure of what he would do next. To her surprise, he didn't yell or make a scene. Instead, he looked at her for a long beat before letting out a slow, almost amused breath. "You're brave," he said, his voice no longer laced with condescension, but something else, something like respect. He leaned back in his chair, observing her with a curious intensity. "Most people just run when they see me. But you stood up to me. That's something." Emma didn't know what to say. She had just spoken her mind, not expecting it to make much of a difference. But somehow, she felt a little lighter. Something shifted in the air between them, and for the first time that night, she didn't feel invisible. As she walked away, she couldn't help but glance back at the man, who was now watching her with a thoughtful expression. What was it about him that made everyone avoid him? What was he really like under that cold exterior? Little did Emma know, her encounter with him that night was only the beginning of a much bigger story, one that would completely change her life. Stay tuned, because what happens next might just surprise you. I know she was probably expecting an apology, but I wasn't going to give her one. That was my first thought as I sat there, watching her walk away. I had been used to people bowing to me, afraid to stand up, let alone talk back. But something about this girl, Emma, I think her name was made me reconsider everything I thought I knew. As she walked away, I couldn't help but feel a strange tug in my chest. She was different, and for the first time in years, I wanted to see more. I had just moved to this city a few weeks ago for business, and I hadn't really gotten the chance to settle in. I kept myself busy, hiding behind meetings and late-night calls, pretending I didn't need anyone. I'd spent so many years building my empire, but somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. I had forgotten what it felt like to connect with people. Emma's bravery, her honesty, was a reminder of something I had lost. Maybe I could learn something from her, I thought. I wasn't sure why, but I decided to keep an eye on her. The next few days at the restaurant were like any other, until Emma caught my attention again. She was walking through the back entrance of the restaurant, carrying a tray of drinks, when she tripped and almost fell. I watched in silence as she managed to catch herself at the last second, but the tray still slipped out of her hands, sending glasses crashing to the floor. I had never seen anyone so composed in such a messy situation, but there she was, standing tall as if nothing had happened. "Are you okay?" I asked, without thinking, stepping toward her. She froze for a second, surprised that someone was actually speaking to her. Then, she quickly regained her composure and smiled politely. "I'm fine," she replied, kneeling down to clean up the mess. "Don't worry about it." I watched her for a few moments, surprised by how quickly she moved, how efficiently she cleaned up the broken glasses without hesitation. It was like she was used to handling chaos. I had never met anyone who handled pressure like she did. Most people would have gotten flustered, but not her. As she finished cleaning up the last piece of glass, she looked up and caught my gaze. I could see something in her eyes, a quiet strength that was hidden beneath her kind exterior. She didn't see me as a millionaire or someone she had to impress. She saw me for who I was, or rather, for who I wasn't. For the first time in a long while, I realized that I had been living in a bubble. My wealth, my status, meant nothing to her. She wasn't interested in anything I had. She only cared about me. It was a strange feeling, to be seen for the first time in years. Most people either admired me for my wealth or treated me like I was untouchable. But Emma wasn't like that. I found myself becoming more and more intrigued by her. I wanted to know what made her tick, what kept her so grounded when everyone around her was getting lost in their own egos. And then it hit me she didn't need anyone to validate her. She was already confident in who she was. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wanted to know her better. I didn't want to just be another rich guy who passed through her life and left. No, I wanted to make a difference. I wasn't sure how, but I knew I had to do something. I wasn't going to sit back and let this slip through my fingers. And that's when I made the decision. The next day, I called the restaurant and asked to meet with her. It was a strange request, but I needed to do this. I had to see her again, to talk to her, outside of the restaurant. I wanted to see if there was more to her story, so I waited. I wasn't sure how she would react, but I was determined to make it happen. When I saw her walk into the coffee shop where I'd set up our meeting, my heart raced a little. She looked just as beautiful as I remembered, but this time, she seemed even more confident. She walked over and sat down, looking at me with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. "You wanted to talk?" she asked, her voice steady but with a hint of caution. "Yes," I replied, leaning forward. "I just wanted to apologize for how I treated you the other night. I wasn't exactly kind." She looked at me, her expression softening slightly. "It's fine. You were just frustrated, I guess." I shook my head. "No, it wasn't just that. I was rude, and I shouldn't have treated you like that. I'm sorry." She paused for a moment, then gave me a small smile. "Thank you," she said simply. "But really, it's okay." The conversation flowed easily after that. We talked about our lives, about the restaurant, and about what we wanted from life. I found myself drawn to her more than I could explain. There was something about the way she saw the world that made me want to see it differently too. I didn't know where this was going yet. But one thing was for sure. I wasn't going to let her slip away. As I walked out of the coffee shop that day, I knew that this was just the beginning. I didn't know what I was expecting from our conversation, but as Emma and I sat there in the coffee shop, I realized I was enjoying myself in a way I hadn't in a long time. The usual walls I put up around myself were slowly crumbling, and I wasn't entirely sure I wanted them back. Emma had this way of making things feel easy, as though we had known each other for years instead of just a few brief, awkward encounters. She didn't ask questions about my wealth or my company, and that felt refreshing. Most people, even if they didn't ask outright, always seemed to be more interested in my money than who I actually was. But with Emma, it was different. She asked about my childhood, what I did for fun when I wasn't working, and she genuinely listened to my answers. I was surprised at how much I wanted to talk to her, to share the parts of me that no one else really cared about. It felt natural, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I had to be anyone else but myself. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and when I stood up to leave, I realized I didn't want the conversation to end. "I'm glad we talked," I said, offering her a small smile. "Me too," she replied, standing up to gather her things. It was nice getting to know the real you. I hesitated for a second before speaking. I was thinking, maybe I could take you out to dinner tomorrow night, just the two of us. No pressure, just a meal between two people who aren't trying to impress each other. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, I wondered if I had misread the situation. I think that sounds nice," she said, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I'll be off work at 6, so let's say 7? I grinned, relieved. It's a date. The next evening, I arrived at the restaurant a little early, wanting to make sure everything was perfect. I'd never really cared about making things perfect for anyone, but Emma had a way of making you want to try. I saw her walking through the door, looking just as beautiful as I remembered, but this time there was something different about her. Her confidence was more noticeable now, a quiet strength that seemed to shine through. She walked straight to the table where I was sitting and smiled. "Sorry I'm late," she said as she sat down. "It's fine," I replied, motioning for the waiter to bring us the menus. "I'm just glad you're here." As we ordered our food and continued talking, I couldn't help but feel a connection growing between us. It wasn't about the superficial things anymore. It was about the conversations we were having, the way she made me see the world a little differently. I found myself laughing more than I had in months, genuinely enjoying her company. The meal was simple, but it felt like the best meal I'd ever had. For the first time, I felt like I was living in the moment, not thinking about work or the million things on my to-do list. We talked about everything: life, love, goals, and even our biggest fears. There was no pretense, no facade, just two people getting to know each other in the most honest way possible. At the end of the night, after the last course had been cleared away, Emma leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I'm glad we did this," she said, her voice soft. "I didn't expect this when I met you." I raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" She smiled, looking down at her empty plate for a moment. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Maybe someone who was just playing the part. The wealthy guy who thinks he can have everything he wants." "And now?" I asked, leaning in a little. "Now I'm not so sure," she said with a grin. "Maybe you're just a guy who's tired of playing the part." Her words hit me harder than I expected, and for a second, I was speechless. She was right, in a way. I had been living in this bubble, pretending that wealth and success were all that mattered. But Emma was showing me that there was more to life than that there was value in authenticity, in being real with people. As the night came to an end, I walked Emma to her car, the air cool and crisp. When we reached her car, she turned to face me, a soft smile on her lips. "Thanks for dinner," she said. "I really enjoyed it." "Me too," I replied, my voice sincere. "I'll see you soon?" "Definitely," she said, before getting in her car and driving away. As I watched her leave, I realized something: I had been living my life for everyone else, for the expectations placed on me by my family, my business, and society. But Emma had made me realize that I didn't need to be anyone but myself. I was ready for the next step, whatever that might be. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of it. I had no idea what I was getting myself into when I agreed to meet her again. It wasn't just dinner anymore. There was something about Emma that made everything else fade into the background. The truth was, I hadn't been honest with her yet, not about who I really was, not about how I had built my empire. It had always been so easy to hide behind my wealth, to keep people at a distance. But Emma had a way of making me want to change, of making me want to be seen for who I really was. As I sat there, staring out at the city lights, I realized I wasn't just falling for her, I was falling for the idea of being a better person, the person I had forgotten I could be. I thought back to our first meeting, the way she had stood up to me when everyone else would have run. I had treated her like she was just another waitress, someone I could dismiss. But she refused to be dismissed. She challenged me in a way I hadn't been challenged in years. I remembered her laughter, the way she spoke so freely, without fear of judgment. And it hit me, she was the kind of person I wanted to be around. But there was something I had to do before I could let this go any further. I had to be honest with her, and I had to do it soon. The next time I saw her, I knew I had to tell her everything. The night we met for coffee felt like a turning point, and I couldn't let this chance slip away. As I arrived at the restaurant that evening, I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. She was already there, sitting at the table we'd chosen the last time. And when she saw me, her eyes lit up in a way that made me feel like I was the only person in the room. "Hey," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "Hey," I replied, smiling as I sat down across from her. "I've been thinking." She raised an eyebrow. "About what?" "About us," I said, suddenly feeling nervous. "And about me. I haven't been completely honest with you." She leaned in slightly, her curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that were threatening to get the best of me. "I'm not just some guy who works in tech," I began, my voice steady but honest. "I'm the CEO of a company. A big one." I could see her eyes widen slightly, but she didn't say anything. She just waited for me to continue. "I know it might seem like I've been hiding something from you, but the truth is, I didn't want you to see me as just another billionaire. I wanted you to see me as someone real, someone who could be vulnerable and honest." I paused, trying to gauge her reaction. "I didn't want you to think I was just another guy using his wealth to get what he wanted. I've done that before, and it never ends well. But with you, it feels different. I want to be better. I want to be the kind of person you see me as, not the kind of person I've been hiding behind all these years." She sat there for a moment, taking in what I had said. Her expression softened, and then she smiled gently. "You know," she said, "I figured there was something more to you than just being some tech guy. But you didn't have to tell me all this, you know." "I wanted to," I said, "because I want you to know the real me, not the guy I've been pretending to be." She looked at me for a long time, and for a moment I thought she might get up and walk away. But instead, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I appreciate your honesty," she said quietly, "and I think that's what matters. The fact that you're being real with me, that's all I need." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. "You're not upset?" I asked, needing to hear her say it. She shook her head. "No, I'm not upset. I'm just glad you're being honest, and I'm glad I'm getting to know you." That was all I needed to hear. It was enough. We sat there for a while, talking about everything and nothing, and for the first time, I felt completely at ease. She wasn't looking at me like I was a prize to be won, or a man with money to impress. She was looking at me like I was just a person, like I mattered. And that's when I realized this was it. This was what I had been looking for all along. It wasn't the power or the success. It was finding someone who could see me for who I really was. Someone who could make me feel like I wasn't just a man with money, but a man with a future. As the night wore on, we said our goodbyes, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. I knew I had just taken the first step towards something real, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. I never expected things to change so quickly. Just a few weeks ago, I was a man focused on business, living in a world that felt cold and distant. But now, with Emma by my side, everything felt different. We continued to spend time together, slowly getting to know each other in ways I had never experienced before. The more I learned about her, the more I realized how little I had understood about the world outside of my own bubble. Emma's life wasn't filled with luxury or endless opportunities, but she carried herself with a strength that made her more real than anyone I had ever known. I began to look at the world through her eyes, and for the first time, I understood what it meant to appreciate the small things in life. Our relationship grew naturally, and as time passed, I found myself not only falling for her but also wanting to be better, to live with purpose beyond just accumulating wealth. One evening, after a casual dinner at her favorite cafe, I realized how much I had come to rely on her presence in my life. It wasn't just about the connection we shared. It was about how she made me feel like I mattered. Not because of my title or my bank account, but because I was simply myself around her. I had never known that feeling before. "You've changed me," I admitted one night, as we sat on the balcony of her small apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. She turned to me, her eyes soft but curious. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice gentle. I started, taking a deep breath. "I've spent so long chasing after success, after things that didn't really matter, that I lost sight of what was important. But when I'm with you, it's like everything else fades away. You make me want to be a better person, not because I have to, but because it feels right." She smiled, reaching over to take my hand. "I'm glad I could help you see that," she said quietly, squeezing my hand gently. We sat in silence for a while, letting the moment sink in. I had never imagined that a woman like Emma, someone so different from the world I came from, could have such a profound impact on me. But there it was, she had opened my eyes in a way no one else ever had. The next day, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep hiding behind my wealth and my status. I was going to be honest with the people who worked with me, with the people I had built this empire with. I was going to tell them about Emma, about the way she had changed me, and about how I wanted to live my life differently moving forward. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. As I stood in front of my team that morning, I felt the weight of my decision, but I also felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't felt in years. "I've been living my life with a mask on," I said, my voice steady but sincere. "I've been focused on the wrong things for so long, but Emma has reminded me that there's more to life than just business. There's real value in the people we care about, in the connections we make, and in being true to ourselves. From now on, I want to make decisions that reflect who I really am, not just the CEO of this company." There was a moment of silence in the room, and I could see the surprise in their eyes, but I also saw something else: respect. For the first time, I felt like I was truly leading, not by title or authority, but by being the person I was meant to be. After the meeting, I reached out to Emma to tell her what had happened. She was thrilled, of course, but she also reminded me that the real change was still to come. "You've taken the first step," she said, her voice filled with pride. I felt like I could be vulnerable, like I could be the man I had always wanted to be. The man who wasn't afraid of his own emotions. The man who could let someone else in. The days that followed were full of small victories, both personal and professional. I started making changes at work, pushing for more ethical decisions, being more hands-on with the people I worked with, and genuinely connecting with them. I had no idea that the decision I made to be open about myself at work would spark such a chain of events. But as the days passed, I realized that it was the first step toward a life I had only dreamed of before. Emma and I continued to spend more time together, and each day, I found myself falling deeper for her, not just because of her beauty, but because of the way she made me see the world with fresh eyes. There were moments when I still doubted myself, wondering if I was truly capable of changing everything I had built over the years. But every time I was with her, those doubts seemed to fade away. One evening, as we sat in the small apartment she had worked so hard to make her own, I felt the weight of the past few weeks finally catch up to me. It had been a whirlwind, a mix of new beginnings, tough conversations, and undeniable connections, but I was starting to feel like I was finally where I was supposed to be. "I'm proud of you," she said, looking up from the book she was reading, her eyes soft but sincere. "You've come so far already." I smiled, a little embarrassed, but grateful for her words. "I couldn't have done it without you," I said honestly. "You've made me realize what I was missing all these years." She turned to me, her eyes soft but curious. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice gentle. I started, taking a deep breath. I've spent so long chasing after success, after things that didn't really matter, that I lost sight of what was important. But when I'm with you, it's like everything else fades away. You make me want to be a better person, not because I have to, but because it feels right. She smiled, reaching over to take my hand. I felt like I could be vulnerable, like I could be the man I had always wanted to be. The man who wasn't afraid of his own emotions. The man who could let someone else in. The days that followed were full of small victories, both personal and professional. I started making changes at work, pushing for more ethical decisions, being more hands-on with the people I worked with, and genuinely connecting with them. I wasn't just the guy who made the decisions from behind the scenes anymore. I was the guy who listened, who cared, and who led with integrity. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I thought I had made a mistake. But then, I would look over at Emma, and I would realize that this was what I had always been searching for. This feeling of peace, of purpose. It wasn't about the company, or the money, or the power. It was about the people I was surrounding myself with, and the life I was building with them. One evening, after an exhausting day at work, I met Emma at a park near her place. We decided to take a walk, and as we strolled beneath the twinkling city lights, I felt something shift, something bigger than both of us. I don't want to mess this up, I confessed, my voice a little shaky. Everything feels so perfect right now, and I'm just afraid that if I make the wrong move, it'll all fall apart. She stopped walking and turned to face me, her eyes full of warmth. You're not going to mess it up, she said softly. You've already made the right choice by being true to yourself. Everything else will fall into place. I wanted to believe her, but the fear still lingered. I had never been good at trusting things that felt too good to be true, but with Emma, I felt a sense of calm that I had never felt before. I hope you're right, I said quietly. I'm someone who wants more, someone who wants to build something real, something lasting, and I want to build that with you. She smiled, her eyes sparkling as she reached for my hand. I want that too, she said softly. I want us to have something real, something that goes beyond all the material things, something built on trust and love. Her words filled me with warmth, but I knew that it was time to show her how much I meant those words. I didn't need to have it all figured out. All I knew was that Emma had shown me something I had been missing for years, a chance at a real life, a life full of love, honesty, and connection. And I was ready to take that chance. I wasn't going to let it slip away. As the weeks went by, I found myself becoming more and more immersed in this new life that I was building with Emma. I felt like I could be vulnerable, like I could be the man I had always wanted to be. The man who wasn't afraid of his own emotions. The man who could let someone else in. The days that followed were full of small victories, both personal and professional. I started making changes at work, pushing for more ethical decisions, being more hands-on with the people I worked with, and genuinely connecting with them. We spent our evenings together, talking about our dreams, our fears, and our plans for the future. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just talking about business or ambitions. I was talking about what truly mattered, about building a life with someone who cared about me for who I was, not what I had. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting, I found myself sitting in my office, staring out the window at the city skyline. My mind kept drifting back to Emma, to the way she made me feel like I was enough, just as I was. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in so long, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. I had everything I could possibly want in terms of success, but it was her that made me realize that true fulfillment came from connection, from love, from being seen and understood. I decided, right then and there, that it was time to take the next step. There was a moment of silence in the room, and I could see the surprise in their eyes, but I also saw something else: respect. For the first time, I felt like I was truly leading, not by title or authority, but by being the person I was meant to be. After the meeting, I reached out to Emma to tell her what had happened. She was thrilled, of course, but she also reminded me that the real change was still to come. "You've taken the first step," she said, her voice filled with pride. There were still moments when doubts crept in, when I questioned if I was truly doing the right thing by stepping away from the old version of myself. But with Emma by my side, I started to realize that change wasn't as terrifying as I once thought. She had a way of making me feel like everything I was doing was not only possible, but worth it. Every day, I was rediscovering what it meant to be real, to be vulnerable, and to live a life that had meaning beyond success and wealth. My mind kept drifting back to Emma, to the way she made me feel like I was enough, just as I was. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in so long, and I couldn't help but smile to myself. I had everything I could possibly want in terms of success, but it was her that made me realize that true fulfillment came from connection, from love, from being seen and understood. I decided, right then and there, that it was time to take the next step. I had been living my life for far too long in a way that was defined by success and status, but now, with Emma, I realized that I had something far more valuable: love. I stood up, taking her hand and gently pulling her to her feet. I know we've only been together for a little while, but I feel like we've already built something special. Something that's worth fighting for, I said, my voice steady with determination. I want to keep building that with you, every single day. I wasn't just the man I used to be, I was someone who had learned to love, who had learned to open up, and who was ready to share his life with the woman who had changed him forever. I love you, I said. The words coming out so easily, as if they had been waiting to be spoken for years. Emma's smile widened as she pulled me into a tight embrace. I love you too, she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. It was a simple exchange, but in that moment, I felt more at peace than I had ever felt in my life. For the first time, I wasn't chasing after something I thought would make me happy. I had found it, right here with her. From that moment on, I knew that no matter what the future held, I was ready to face it with her by my side. Together, we would build a life that was about more than just success or wealth. It would be about love, trust, and the kind of connection that couldn't be broken. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had everything I needed, and I was ready to hold on to it. I had found the most important thing of all: the person who made me feel complete. As the days passed, Emma and I found ourselves more connected than ever. Our bond grew stronger with each passing moment, and the life I had once known, filled with power, status, and cold business deals, began to feel like a distant memory. I was no longer the same person I had been when I first met her. I was someone new, someone better. With Emma by my side, I realized that the true meaning of life wasn't about what you owned or what you could control, but about the people you loved and the connections you made. It was about being honest, being vulnerable, and, most importantly, being yourself. Emma had taught me all of this without even trying, and for that, I was grateful. One evening, we were sitting in her living room, curled up on the couch after a long day. The warmth of her presence filled the space between us, and for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. The usual worries about work, about the future, about the uncertainty of everything else, seemed to fade away in her arms. It was just the two of us, in the moment, and it was all I needed. Do you ever think about the future? I asked, breaking the silence. I'm someone who wants more, someone who wants to build something real, something lasting, and I want to build that with you. She smiled, her eyes sparkling as she reached for my hand. I want that too, she said softly. I want us to have something real, something that goes beyond all the material things, something built on trust and love. Her words filled me with warmth, but I knew that it was time to show her how much I meant those words. I used to think that I had to build this empire, that I had to be the best at everything, that success was the only thing that mattered. But now I see that it's not about that at all. It's about who you have beside you, who you share your life with, and how you make those relationships meaningful. Emma smiled, squeezing my hand. I'm glad you see that now, she said. Because I don't need anything from you except you. That's all I've ever wanted. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had everything I needed, and I was ready to hold on to it. I had found the most important thing of all: the person who made me feel complete. As the days passed, Emma and I found ourselves more connected than ever. Our bond grew stronger with each passing moment, and the life I had once known, filled with power, status, and cold business deals, began to feel like a distant memory. Emma and I continued to explore the world around us, making new memories and forging new paths together. We made decisions together, from the small, everyday choices to the bigger ones that would shape our future. It felt like a new chapter, one that was far more fulfilling than anything I had experienced before. But even with all the changes, there were moments when I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. That night, as we sat on her couch, wrapped in the warmth of each other's company, I took a deep breath and looked into her eyes. "Emma," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what I want for the future, and what kind of man I want to be." She looked at me, her expression soft, and waited for me to continue. "I know I've made mistakes in the past, but I'm not that man anymore. I'm not just the CEO. I'm not just the guy with money." This was about showing Emma how deeply I loved her, how grateful I was for everything she had done for me, and how much I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. I had made up my mind. I walked inside and asked the salesperson to help me find the perfect ring. I wasn't going to rush this decision. I wanted it to be something special, something that represented everything we had been through together. A few days later, I invited Emma to dinner at one of our favorite spots. The evening was perfect, the restaurant's soft lighting setting the mood just right. We enjoyed our meal, laughing and talking as usual, but tonight felt different. There was an energy in the air, a sense of anticipation that neither of us could quite explain. After dessert, I stood up, took her hand, and led her outside to the quiet terrace that overlooked the city. The stars above us seemed to shine a little brighter, and for a moment, it felt like the world had paused just for us. Emma had already shown me that love wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for each other, through the good times and the hard ones. "We don't need to have everything figured out," I said, pulling back slightly so I could look into her eyes. "We don't need to be perfect. We just need to be together. And that's enough for me." She smiled, a soft, relieved smile, and nodded. "You're right," she said, her voice full of love. "I just needed to hear you say that." "I'm saying that I want to spend the rest of my life with you," I said, my heart racing. "Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears as she stared at the ring, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then, she smiled, the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." And in that moment, everything in my life fell into place. The past, the present, and the future, all of it suddenly made sense. Emma had become my everything, and together, we were about to start the most beautiful chapter of our lives. As the days passed after our engagement, it felt like the world had slowed down just for us. Everything felt more vivid, more meaningful. The challenges I had once faced, running a company, making tough decisions, balancing the expectations of the world no longer seemed as heavy. Now, I had a partner in Emma, someone who made everything feel lighter. Together, we spent our time planning for the future, not just the wedding, but the life we wanted to build. Every decision we made, every moment we shared, made me realize how much I had been missing in my life. I had been so consumed with ambition, so focused on achieving more and more, that I had forgotten what truly mattered: love, connection, and the people who make you feel like you're enough. I was sitting in my office one afternoon, the city spread out before me, when I received a message from Emma. She was at a meeting, and though she was always so confident, there was something in her text that made me worry. "Can you come by later? I need to talk to you." My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't imagine what she needed to talk about, but I rushed over to meet her as soon as I could. When I arrived at her office, I found her standing by the window, staring out at the bustling streets below. She turned as I entered, and I saw that her eyes were a little red, like she had been holding back tears. "Emma," I said softly, approaching her. "What's wrong?" She looked at me, her expression unreadable for a moment, before she took a deep breath. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice wavering just a little, "about the future, about us." Emma had become my everything, and together, we were about to start the most beautiful chapter of our lives. As the days passed after our engagement, it felt like the world had slowed down just for us. Everything felt more vivid, more meaningful. The challenges I had once faced, running a company, making tough decisions, balancing the expectations of the world no longer seemed as heavy. Now, I had a partner in Emma, someone who made everything feel lighter. Together, we spent our time planning for the future, not just the wedding, but the life we wanted to build. Every decision we made, every moment we shared, made me realize how much I had been missing in my life. I had been so consumed with ambition, so focused on achieving more and more, that I had forgotten what truly mattered: love, connection, and the people who make you feel like you're enough. When I arrived at her office, I found her standing by the window, staring out at the bustling streets below. She turned as I entered, and I saw that her eyes were a little red, like she had been holding back tears. "Emma," I said softly, approaching her. "What's wrong?" She looked at me, her expression unreadable for a moment, before she took a deep breath. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice wavering just a little, "about the future, about us." Emma's breath hitched as she wiped her eyes, and she took a step closer to me. "I don't want to let you down," she whispered. "You won't," I reassured her, pulling her into my arms. "You'll never let me down." We stood there in the embrace, the weight of the world suddenly feeling so much lighter. In that moment, I realized that everything I had been afraid of losing her, not being enough for her, was all just a reflection of my own insecurities. Emma had already shown me that love wasn't about perfection. It was about being there for each other, through the good times and the hard ones. "We don't need to have everything figured out," I said, pulling back slightly so I could look into her eyes. "We don't need to be perfect. We just need to be together. And that's enough for me." She smiled, a soft, relieved smile, and nodded. "You're right," she said, her voice full of love. "I just needed to hear you say that." In that moment, everything felt perfect. Not because there were no challenges ahead, but because we had each other, and that was all we needed. As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, I knew one thing for sure: we were ready for whatever came next, together. And that was more than enough. Over the next few months, our wedding plans fell into place, not with the rush or pressure that I had once expected, but with the quiet joy of two people who were simply ready to start the next chapter of their lives. When the day finally came, I stood at the altar, my heart racing. But this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was out of love, out of gratitude, and out of the certainty that this was the best decision I had ever made. When Emma walked down the aisle, her smile lit up the entire room, and I knew in that moment that everything had led up to this. This was where we were meant to be. And as we exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other forever, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. Because now, I knew that I had found my home, my happiness, and my future. Together, we were unstoppable. In this heartwarming tale of love, growth, and personal transformation, we dive into the journey of a man who, despite his wealth and success, learns the true meaning of happiness through an unexpected connection with a woman named Emma. This is one of those powerful millionaire stories that reminds us that life is not about the material possessions we accumulate, but about the relationships we build. As our protagonist learns, it's the simple moments with the people we love that matter most. Over the next few months, our wedding plans fell into place, not with the rush or pressure that I had once expected, but with the quiet joy of two people who were simply ready to start the next chapter of their lives. When the day finally came, I stood at the altar, my heart racing. But this time, it wasn't out of fear. It was out of love, out of gratitude, and out of the certainty that this was the best decision I had ever made. As the narrative unfolds, we witness how the couple grows together, with love and mutual respect, transforming their lives in ways they never imagined. If you're a fan of millionaire stories that focus on the emotional journeys of their characters, this is a must-watch. This is more than just a tale of riches. It's a reminder that no amount of money can replace the value of a genuine connection. As the story reaches its climax, we are left with the powerful message that love, trust, and vulnerability can lead to a life richer than any fortune. If you're looking for millionaire stories that are not just about money but also about the heart, you won't want to miss this one. The lessons learned, the growth experienced, and the love that flourishes will stay with you long after the story ends. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this touching journey through one of the most unforgettable millionaire stories you'll ever hear.